Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Battle Through the Heavens based on novel. So let's start. Only after everyone fled the Demon Flame Valley in a miserable manner did they stop running, but they had all been shaken up pretty badly. They stood on a slope and looked at the many mountain peaks around them that had suddenly become empty. All of them involuntarily inhaled a cool breath. The forest of this mountain range had been destroyed by Xiao Yan's fire lotus. Everyone stood outside of the valley in a hushed manner. The atmosphere was very quiet. There was a look of sedation within the eyes of quite a number of people. It was likely that even an ordinary elite zone would have difficulty creating such frightening destruction. It was unexpected that it all came from Xiao Yan's hands. Only at this moment did the doubt regarding the rumor of Xiao Yan being able to contend with an elite zone quietly disappear. Within the crowd, Su Mai, Wu Tai, Old Ying Jiyu, and the other helpers that Xiao Li had summoned exchanged looks with each other. They could see a shock that was difficult to hide in the eyes of the other party. This was not the first time that they had seen Xiao Yan's Fire Lotus Do technique. When they had followed him to the Jiomar Empire back then, Xiao Yan had displayed it once against the Misty Cloud sect. However, the strength then was much weaker compared now. Clearly, the might of this Fire Lotus Do technique had grown extremely quickly following the increase of Xiao Yan's level. At this moment, those people who were acquainted with him would involuntarily feel stunned when recalling this scene. Who would have expected a couple of years ago that this young man, who was looked down upon and discriminated within the clan, would be able to create such a reputation? Father, your eyesight is really very good. Third brother might well become the most outstanding person in our clan's history. He might even be able to surpass the so-called Xiao clan's ancestors, who might not exist that you mentioned back then. Xiao Li's thoughts slowly calmed down as he raised his head, looked at the skinny back in the sky and muttered softly. The black fog scattered and drifted in the sky. After the frightening eruption of the Fire Lotus, the originally enormous black fog region had been completely destroyed. The permeating black fog was scattering at a rate visible to the naked eye. Xiao Yan's eyes were icy cold as he watched the swiftly scattering black fog. He took out a couple of medicinal pills from his ring and stuffed them into his mouth. Immediately, a faint redness surfaced on his pale white face. Using the three-colored Fire Lotus exhausted a ton of Do Qi. However, it was fortunate that Xiao Yan's strength was already mighty. Hence, the sequelae of gradually descending into unconsciousness the moment the Fire Lotus left his hand did not happen anymore. The little fairy doctor stood facing the wind beside Xiao Yan. The demonic charm contained in her grayish-purple eyes firmly stared at a certain spot in the black fog. A dense poison fog quietly churned on her hand as she prepared to attack. The black fog gradually scattered under the watchful eyes of the two people, revealing an extremely miserable figure within. At this moment, Han Feng's clothes were in tatters. His body did not even have a patch of skin that looked normal. Blood bubbles surfaced in a dense manner and his hair had been completely incinerated. His face and chest were filled with blood traces. If one were to look carefully, half of this fellow's hands had been blasted apart. Fresh blood dripped from them. Han Feng's body stiffened when the cry sounded. Immediately, a strange blood-red color surfaced on his body, turning him into something like a blood person. You used poison? The boiling feeling that was emitted from the blood within his body caused Han Feng's face to instantly turn pale. His eyes viciously glared at the little fairy doctor as he hissed. The little fairy doctor's gaze coldly glanced at Han Feng. She extended her finger and immediately pressed it heavily on the latter's head. A strange snort was emitted from her mouth. Bang! Han Feng's eyes suddenly widened as this sound landed in his ears. His eyes appeared to be about to pop out. Then, he heard a muffled sound as his skin burst apart. Fresh blood transformed into a blood fog that scattered into the sky. The sudden blood fireworks caused everyone to feel stunned. They immediately saw Han Feng's broken body fall head-first from the sky. Finally, it landed heavily on a rock. A snap sound appeared and even his bones split apart at this moment. The world had become completely silent as everyone stared at the pile of rotten flesh. No one expected that Han Feng, who had grand plans just an hour ago, had at this moment fallen to such an end. While everyone was hissing, none of them sensed a thread of spiritual strength quietly spring out from the pile of bloody meat. It entered the ground and swiftly fled. Bang! Just when the thread of spiritual strength was about to flee, a black figure suddenly fell from the sky. A fist violently smashed into the ground and was withdrawn from it. A spiritual strength was struggling with all its might in his hand. Han Feng's savage and vicious face faintly surfaced in it. Senior, if you were to leave now, how would you be worthy of the big gift that I have given you? Xiao Yan smiled slightly as he looked at the spiritual strength in his hand. However, his smile contained a blade-like killing intent. In front of Xiao Yan, who possessed an exceptionally sharp spiritual perception, this little trick of Han Feng was not something that could be hidden. This thread of spiritual strength had not only failed to hide its figure by fleeing underground, but had instead exposed itself to Xiao Yan. A cluster of jade-green flames rose on his hand, wrapping around the spiritual strength. Xiao Yan then took out a jade bottle and threw the spiritual strength in. He wiped his hand and a faint fire layer made of jade-green flame was formed at the mouth of the bottle. I will entertain you properly once this is over, senior. The corner of Xiao Yan's mouth was lifted into a cold smile. With a flip of his hand, he returned the jade bottle to his storage ring. Xiao Yan only raised his head after securing the spiritual strength. His eyes looked all around him and he saw how the demon flame valley had been turned to ruins. His calm eyes slowly took in the open ground. The area immediately became quiet when they saw Xiao Yan's sweeping gaze. The experts and leaders from the Black Corner region, who had been invited by Han Feng, felt their hearts leap. Their gazes drifted uncertainly and were afraid to meet Xiao Yan's eyes. They had witnessed this great battle today. There had been 2 or 3 if one included the so-called fierce spirit, elite dozones on their side. However, these 3 elite dozones had all perished by Xiao Yan's hand. It is fortunate that I did not indicate that I wanted to follow Han Feng. Otherwise, quite a number of people quietly wiped off cold sweat as they rejoiced in their hearts. Xiao Yan's gaze did not pause for a long time on these people. After looking once around, it paused on old Ying Shan. Little friend Xiao Yan. The old me has acted according to our agreement and did not intervene to help Han Feng. May I know? Mo Qianxing ignored the thoughts within the hearts of those around him. He changed the topic and smiled as he spoke to Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's eyes landed on the little fairy doctor when he heard this. He nodded slightly, and she waved her hand. A jade bottle was tossed to Mo Qianxing. Mo Qianxing extended his hand and a wind surged out of it after he saw the item tossed over by the little fairy doctor. He immediately grabbed the jade bottle from the air and wrapped various layers of doqi around its surface. Only then did he carefully open the bottle cap and to reveal grayish-brown medicinal powder within. One could not blame Mo Qianxing for being this careful. He knew a little about the little fairy doctor. He knew that her poison skill was deep and unpredictable. If he was careless, it was likely that he would be tricked by her. The scene of Han Feng's body exploding earlier was clearly captured in his eyes. Though part of the reason Han Feng exploded was because he had been seriously injured, but potent poison should never be underestimated. Mix the medicinal powder within boiling water. Allow your son to soak within it for 1 month. The poison will be completely gone by then. The little fairy doctor coldly explained after glancing at Mo Qianxing, who had carefully received the jade bottle. Thank you. Mo Qianxing sighed in relief after hearing this. He eventually cupped his hands to the little fairy doctor as he replied. The little fairy doctor ignored this thanks by him. From the way she saw it, this person was too cunning and too much of a hypocrite. He was really detestable. In his doubt, Xiao Yan's gaze suddenly glanced at Zi Yang, who had crossed her arms over her chest. He was involuntarily startled as he smiled and said, I had forgotten about you, girl. Isn't searching for treasure your speciality? You only remembered me now? Zi Yang coldly snorted at Xiao Yan's words. Clearly, she was somewhat displeased with Xiao Yang for remembering her only at this moment. Xiao Yang involuntarily let out a bitter laugh when he saw her pout. He persuaded her with nice words, causing a slight smile appear on this little grandante's face. After which she shut her eyes and slowly opened them a moment later. Her body moved and rushed to the deepest parts of the Demon Flame Valley. Xiao Yan, Xiao Li, the little fairy doctor, and the others behind hurriedly followed upon seeing this. They followed behind Zi Yang as they passed through a long path within the valley. Around a couple of minutes later, their sight was covered by a rock wall that was filled with wild grass. The few human figures slowly stopped in front of this rock wall. Their gazes swept over it, but they did not sense anything unusual about it. Their gazes immediately swept doubtfully to Zi Yang. Magic? Zi Yang immediately smiled pridefully when she saw the lost look on the faces of most of Xiao Yang's group. Her body flashed and moved, appearing at a certain part of the rock wall. After which, she tightly clenched her little fist and violently smashed it down. Xiao Yang extended his hand and pulled the excited-faced Zi Yang behind him as he studied the cave behind the rock wall. After which, his eyes made contact with the little fairy doctor, Su Qian and Xiao Li. The Doqi within their bodies quietly circulated. Only then did they slowly make their way to the hole that had been forcefully created by Zi Yang. They slowly walked in. They were extremely careful where they placed each footstep since they were unaware of what was hidden here. They made their way through the small tunnel before finally stopping inside of the cave a moment later. Standing at this spot, they could vaguely see some light emitted from within the cave. Some magical beast drawings were present on the rock walls surrounding the cave. At a glance they appeared to possess a stern, fierce aura. However, this kind of deterrence was completely useless against Xiao Yang's group. Su Qian walked at the front. Among all of them, he had preserved the most of his strength. He did not exhaust much strength while dealing with old Ying Shan. It was safest to have him be at the front while exploring this cave where they were ignorant of possible traps. Within the cave were long rock stairs. The rock stairs extended into the faint darkness below where one had difficulty seeing. Some moonlight rocks, emitting a faint light, had been placed on the surrounding mountain walls in a mosaic manner, expelling the darkness within the cave. The couple of them walked along the rock stairs, slowly descending. Around 10 minutes or so later, they finally arrived at the end. At the edge of this flight of stairs was a tightly shut rock door. The rock door was completely black in color with moss coverings all over it, giving it the faint sense of being extremely heavy. "Allow me." Zi Yang immediately volunteered when she saw that it was a rock door. Her little face was filled with excitement. This little girl seemed to like to destroy things. "You should just wait quietly." Xiao Yan helplessly shook his head and grabbed Zi Yang. After which, he nodded to Su Qian. No one knew the situation in this place. Hence, it was best to be careful. Su Qian smiled when he saw this. His shriveled hand slowly pressed on the rock door. After which, the expression in his eyes became stern. A majestic Doqi that was sufficient to destroy mountains and break rocks surged out of his arm in a lightning-like manner. After which, it violently smashed against the rock door with an extremely loud sound. Su Qian walked at the front. Among all of them, he had preserved the most of his strength. He did not exhaust much strength while dealing with old Ying Shan. It was safest to have him be at the front while exploring this cave where they were ignorant of possible traps. Within the cave were long rock stairs. The rock stairs extended into the faint darkness below where one had difficulty seeing. Some moonlight rocks, emitting a faint light, had been placed on the surrounding mountain walls in a mosaic manner, expelling the darkness within the cave. The couple of them walked along the rock stairs, slowly descending. Around 10 minutes or so later, they finally arrived at the end. At the edge of this flight of stairs was a tightly shut rock door. The rock door was completely black in color with moss coverings all over it, giving it the faint sense of being extremely heavy. "You should just wait quietly." Xiao Yang helplessly shook his head and grabbed Zi Yang. After which, he nodded to Su Qian. No one knew the situation in this place. Hence, it was best to be careful. Su Qian smiled when he saw this. His shriveled hand slowly pressed on the rock door. After which, the expression in his eyes became stern. A majestic Doqi that was sufficient to destroy mountains and break rocks surged out of his arm in a lightning-like manner. After which, it violently smashed against the rock door with an extremely loud sound, bang. Rock fragments flew in all directions and the rock door was instantly covered with cracked lines. With a bang, the door suddenly collapsed. A glaring light suddenly shot out. Everyone's eyes narrowed instinctively when the intense light appeared. Immediately, Xiao Yang's expression changed slightly as he softly cried out, "First Elder, be careful." Everyone's gazes slowly swept over the warehouse. Immediately, their gazes paused on the enormous snake-shaped magical beast on the ground. Clearly, it was the sneak attacker from earlier. A Do Wang-class magical beast dares to attack the old me. Su Qian slowly walked into the warehouse. He glanced at the magical beast, which had coiled itself up. It showed its savage snake tongue to them. It should be the guardian of this place. Xiao Yang also smiled. His gaze merely swept over the magical beast before turning to the warehouse. Surprise flashed across his eyes when he saw so many scrolls. He clicked his tongue and praised, "It is indeed worthy of being an ancient faction that has existed for so many years. This collection is indeed good. These are all arranged in terms of class." Xiao Li involuntarily laughed as he walked closer to a bookshelf and looked at the Xian class low-level words written on it. Xiao Yang nodded. His gaze swept around before he walked to the deepest part of the warehouse. An ordinary Xian class Do technique or Qi method would not catch his eye. He was somewhat curious about whether the Demon Flame Valley had a collection of high-class chi methods or do techniques that would cause even him to feel surprise. Hiss. Seeing that Xiao Yang's group had begun searching the warehouse without any fear, the enormous snake that was covered by green-colored scales immediately coiled and lifted its body. While extending its tongue, it swung its tail, carrying an enormous force that violently swept towards Xiao Yang's group. This little girl's brute strength is really frightening. I wonder just what kind of frightening existence her actual form is. Xiao Yang involuntarily shook his head and sighed as he watched the wailing snake-shaped magical beast get dragged away out of the warehouse by Xiang and thrown into some unknown place. I am also not very certain. When I saw this girl back then, she had already accidentally eaten a matured body-transforming grass. However, by being able to possess such a frightening strength as a child, it is likely that her actual body is extraordinary. Su Qian knit his brows and replied, however, it is rumored that there are quite a number of mysterious magical beast clans south of the Central Plains in the continent. The strength of the magical beast clans are extremely powerful. Perhaps one might be able to obtain a little information about this little girl's actual form, their magical beast clan? Xiao Yang's footsteps paused when he heard this somewhat foreign name. Zun. The hand under Xiao Yang's sleeves was suddenly tightened. A heat that was difficult to hide also rose within his eyes. He clearly remembered the words that Zana had told him before she left. Before reaching the Dozone class, he must not make contact. It was likely that she was worried about the various obstructions from within the clan when they met. Dozone His young face revealed a determination under the light. From the way he saw it back then, Dozone appeared to be a distant and unreachable level. Now, however, it was within reach. Wait for me at that time. I will let everyone in your clan know that your eyesight is the best. Xiao Yang softly muttered in his heart. His eyes also erupted into a heated expression that one had never seen, ambition and anticipation. The so-called trash of the Xiao clan would ultimately give everyone a big shock. By the time Xiao Yang withdrew his mind, his footsteps had also come to a stop. He had already walked to the end of the warehouse without realizing it. The shelves beside him did not have many scrolls like the ones in front. Instead, it only had 4 ancient wooden boxes. These few wooden boxes were wrapped in wrought iron with some ancient drawings carved onto them. One could tell at a glance that they were not ordinary items. The surroundings of this bookshelf were not without any protection like the other bookshelves. There was a faint light barrier around them, isolating them. The dense energy vaguely being emitted by the light barrier caused surprise to flash across Xiao Yang's eyes. Good things did indeed need to be a little unique. Xiao Yang was not in a hurry to forcefully damage this light barrier. As this thought flashed across his heart, his gaze slowly swept around the bookshelf, and immediately paused on 2 simple words above the bookshelf, DI class. A smile surfaced on Xiao Yang's face as he looked at these 2 words. It seemed that his trip was not wasted this time around. DI class chi methods and do techniques were rare items. Moreover, for them to be able to be placed so preciously by the old ground demon ghost, it was likely that they were not some ordinary items. Seeing this, Yang finally turned her body and extended her small hand into the light barrier. After which, she reached the bookshelf without any obstruction in front of the group's shocked faces. She began to pull out the 4 wooden boxes one at a time. The strange ability of this girl really amazes people. Not only does she possess a great strength, but she also has the special ability to sense rare medicinal ingredients. Now, she even possesses an immunity to these energy barriers. Su Qian involuntarily shook his head, watching as Xi Yang removed the 4 wooden boxes without much effort. His tone was filled with astonishment. Xiao Yang nodded his head while sharing the same thought. He immediately took the 4 ancient wooden boxes from Xi Yang's hands and opened them one after another. 2 silver-colored scrolls were placed within the first box. The material of these scrolls were quite strange, appearing just like a kind of strange crystal. Their surface even possessed a slight lightning that roamed around like silver snakes. Surprise flashed across Xiao Yang's eyes when he saw these extraordinary-looking scrolls. After which, he took one out and slowly pulled it open. Rushing Lightning Mirror, DI Class Middle Level, Lightning Affinity Chi Method. The surprise in Xiao Yang's eyes grew even denser when he saw the introduction written on the scroll. Lightning Affinity Chi methods were quite rare. Such high-class ones were even harder to find. It was unexpected that they would find one here. Second brother, this is something good. Xiao Yang raised his head and smiled to Xiao Li. After which, Xiao Yao then tossed the scroll to him. Xiao Yang belonged to the fire affinity. A lightning affinity chi method had little use to him. Looks like this old ground demon ghost is also unwilling to take such a chi method out to auction. Hence, he ended up storing them here. Su Qian glanced at the laughing Xiao Li and smiled as he spoke. Xiao Yang nodded. He once again opened a wooden box and a somewhat familiar bright red scroll appeared in his eyes. Flame creation skill? Xiao Yang was immediately startled when he saw this scroll and ended up saying the words out loud. A helpless expression immediately surfaced in his face. He had already obtained this flame creation skill from Fang Yang and the other two elders. However, he had yet to practice it even now. He did not expect another to appear at this moment. Xiao Yang took the scroll and slowly pushed it open. The three large words, flame creation skill, were imprinted into his eyes. This caused the helpless look on Xiao Yang's face to become even greater. It seemed that this thing did not have much as the wooden boxes were opened, revealing two items within. One was a fist-sized fiery red round bead while the other was a greyish-brown ordinary-looking bamboo scroll. The gazes of Xiao Yang's group were first gathered on the fiery red bead. They could sense that it contained a wild and violent fire affinity energy. This is a monster core? Xiao Yang's eyes firmly remained on the fiery red bead as he spoke somewhat uncertainly. This was the first time that he had seen such a high-rank monster core. Yes, it is indeed a monster core. However, its rank is quite high. Moreover, it likely belonged to a high-rank magical beast that can already transform its body. Otherwise, it's unlikely that it would possess such a color and energy. Su Qian fondled his beard. Surprise flashed across his eyes as he said, according to my guess, this magical beast should be a rank 7 fire affinity monster core. It is unexpected that the old ground demon ghost even possessed such an item. Rank 7 magical beast. That was equivalent to the Dozone class. The monster core that was formed within the body of a magical beast of such a rank was extremely valuable. Moreover, the intelligence of a magical beast at this rank was not inferior to that of a human. If it was really forced to a dead end, it would self-destruct its monster core and would not allow its enemies to get anything. Hence, there was seldom anyone who could obtain a monster core of such a rank. Xiao Yang nodded his head. His surprised eyes paused for a moment on the fiery red bead. After which, he turned to the extremely ordinary bamboo scroll. The bamboo scroll was a greyish-brown color. Its material also appeared extremely ordinary. However, Xiao Yang knew that something kept here by the old ground demon ghost would not be ordinary. Xiao Yang slowly pulled the bamboo scroll open after gently cracking a tiny line on it. After which, some blood words that contained a ruthless violence appeared in front of his sweeping gaze, causing his heart to leap abruptly. Sky Demon Puppet. Thank you, First Elder. Xiao Yang smiled upon receiving the scroll. He did not put on an act. This Sky Demon Puppet really interested him. Moreover, other than some of the special ingredients, he basically had all of the basic parts written on it: corpse, spirit, and monster core. He might really be able to refine the so-called Sky Demon Puppet. Xiao Yang stored the bamboo scroll and the flame creation skill into his storage ring. He looked all around him. The other chi methods and do techniques around this place could no longer satisfy him. Only the rare medicinal ingredients that were perfectly preserved had some use to him. Hence, when he grabbed things, he also took some of the medicinal ingredients that might be useful to him in the future. After grabbing all of the things he needed, Xiao Yang finally stopped without feeling completely satisfied. Few of the remaining things within the warehouse could meet his eyes. However, it was an enormous windfall to Xiao Gate. Xiao Gate had been established for a short period of time and had a weak foundation. It did not have many chi methods nor do techniques for its members to practice. Now that they had raided the Demon Flame Valley stores, they were ultimately able to resolve this trouble. Xiao Li also smiled when he saw Xiao Yang stop. He summoned some members of Xiao Gate and used some storage rings to move everything, after which, everyone looked at the empty warehouse, laughed dryly with dark faces and left. A medicinal pill for the nourishment of a spirit was pretty uncommon. Hence, it was quite rare. However, Yao Lao was indeed worthy of his name as Yao Zunja. Xiao Yang took only an hour of searching before he finally found a suitable medicinal pill for the current Tian Hua Zunja from the many medicinal formulas, soul-cultivating saliva. This small thing's tier was not considered too high. It was coincidentally around a tier 5 pill and was not too troublesome to refine. However, the only flaw was that the medicinal ingredients required were far too unusual. It was fortunate that Xiao Yang's current collection was extremely rich. Additionally, the Inner Academy had a store that had been stocked for many years. Hence, it did not cause Xiao Yang too much of a headache. After gathering the many necessary medicinal ingredients to refine the soul-cultivating saliva, Xiao Yang sighed in relief. After which, he summoned his medicinal cauldron. His flame slowly drifted from his hand, and began to work hard to refine a pill during the countdown of the scattering of Tian Huazunzha's spirit. Perhaps it was because he was pressed for time, but Xiao Yang's heart had become a little more anxious. Hence, he failed his first 2 attempts at refinement. However, it was fortunate that Xiao Yan had understood the source of the problem after failing twice. He slowly calmed himself down. The refinement process gradually took the right path. The refinement this time around did not end even after continuing for 3 full days. Although this soul-cultivating saliva might not appear difficult to refine, it consumed an exceptional amount of time. After the lesson earlier, Xiao Yang's heart did not form any anxiety. He continued to maintain a warm flame, slowly refining the cluster of emerald-like liquid within the medicinal cauldron. Yes, with my current condition, it would be difficult to refine it. Tian Huazunzha agreed with him. Xiao Yang smiled. He pushed open the door and slowly walked in the glaring sunlight. However, he had just walked out when he saw Xiao Li pacing back and forth outside of the warehouse. He was involuntarily startled as he smiled and asked, "Second brother, why are you here?" Xiao Li hurriedly turned his body around when he heard this voice. He involuntarily sighed in relief when he saw Xiao Yang walk out. His expression became solemn as he said, "You have finally come out. Quickly go and take a look at the little fairy doctor. Something has happened to her." The smile on Xiao Yang's face suddenly stiffened. Without waiting for Xiao Li to react, he transformed into a blurry black figure that charged away in a lightning-like manner. Xiao Li smiled bitterly and sighed before quickly following the figure. A black figure approached from the distance and appeared outside of the light curtain an instant later. The few inner academy elders were about to stop him when they saw this person's face. Only then did they sigh in relief. They cupped their hands to Xiao Yang and moved their bodies aside. "First elder is inside. You should quickly go in. Be careful of the poison gas," an elder swiftly said after seeing Xiao Yang. The anxiety within Xiao Yang's eyes became even denser when he heard this. He nodded and a jade-green flame surged from his body. He immediately entered the light barrier. A greyish air that carried some stench pounced toward him after he entered the light barrier. However, when it reached the jade-green flame, it was grilled by the high temperature into nothingness, emitting waves of kai-kai sound. Xiao Yang ignored the greyish air that lingered around him and swiftly passed through the courtyard. His footsteps paused when he saw First Elder Su Qian pacing back and forth at the entrance. He hurriedly asked, "First Elder, what has happened?" Su Qian hurriedly turned around when he heard Xiao Yang's voice. He immediately sighed in relief. Pointing to the interior of the house, he spoke with a bitter smile, "I am also unaware of what has happened. Today, an elder suddenly came and reported that this place was emitting a poison gas. Quite a few students have accidentally become unconscious from the poison. I can only seal this place. Originally, I wanted to head in and investigate, but the poison gas inside is too dense. Its corrosive strength is extremely great. If I were to forcefully enter, I'm afraid." Xiao Yang's heart tightened. An uneasiness surged forth. He inhaled a deep breath and swiftly walked forward. When he was about to push open the door, Su Qian by the side hesitated a little and held back his hand that was about to hold Xiao Yang. He sighed, "Be careful." With a nod, Xiao Yang pushed open the door. The jade-green flame curled and rose, wrapping all around his body without letting even a little air pass through. After which, he slowly walked into the room saturated by the greyish-purple poison. A thread of greyish-purple poison fog scattered out when the door was opened. Su Qian hurriedly used his dope chi to wrap it up. After which, he carefully refined it. With a wave of his sleeve, the open door was once again tightly shut. He cried out loud, "Xiao Yang, shout out loud if any situation occurs." Xiao Yang's heart clearly understood that with the little fairy doctor's strength, she would at the very least be able to suppress the woeful poison body for a year. However, during this period of time, she had undone the seal of the woeful poison body a couple of times. This had significantly brought forward the time of the eruption. "Give your hand to me," Xiao Yang said. He might be beating himself in his heart, but he did not dare delay things any longer. The little fairy doctor hesitated a little when she heard him, but she extended her long delicate arm from the underquilt. At this moment, her hand was faintly emitting a strange purple color, causing the solemnness in Xiao Yang's eyes to become denser. Xiao Yang's hand was placed on little fairy doctor's wrist. A slight wisp of flame followed the point of contact and seeped in. After which, it swiftly entered the little fairy doctor's body. Xiao Yang's expression gradually became much uglier after the flame seeped in. At this moment, the little fairy doctor's body seemed to have completely infused with the poison gas. Moreover, this poison gas appeared to be rising and entering her head. Xiao Yang knew that if this poison gas were to enter her brain, the little fairy doctor's consciousness would gradually blur. At that time, it was likely that she would become like the past owners of the woeful poison body, waiting for the miserable final step. Born from woe, and dying in woe. The little fairy doctor's intelligent eyes slowly became much dimmer as she looked at Xiao Yan's gradually uglier expression. The back of her teeth bit her lower lip as she softly said, "Xiao Yan, I have been very happy following you during this period of time. You are my first friend and might also be my last. If I really reach that step, I hope that you will not hold back. I love the academy in this place very much. After I lose consciousness, I don't wish to." "Shut up. What nonsense are you spouting?" Hearing the little fairy doctor saying her last words, Xiao Yang immediately frowned and reprimanded her. "Woeful poison body. Who among the older generation does not know of such a name?" Qian Huazunja laughed faintly. "However, this friend of yours seems to be in the last stages of the woeful poison body eruption. If it is not sealed and the poison gas enters her brain, the result." Xiao Yang was startled when he heard this. He inhaled a deep breath of air and asked, "Does old Mr. Yao know a method to suppress this woeful poison body? Consider yourself lucky that you have met the old me at this time. It is likely that there are extremely few people who know about this sealing method in this continent. Back then, I also possessed a friend with a woeful poison body. This sealing method was created for him. Unfortunately, this seal can only be used once and, at the very most, only lasts 3 years. 3 years later, I still failed to find a method to overcome the woeful poison body, hence, Qian Huazunja softly sighed." Xiao Yan was also startled when he heard his words. This world was indeed full of strange coincidences. After sighing emotionally, he also exhaled in relief, feeling as though he had removed a heavy burden. A 3-year seal was already sufficient. He did not believe that he would not be able to obtain the so-called Sky Poison Dragon Scorpion Beast Monster Core within 3 years. This seal is called the All-Day Fire Seal. It borrows the positive violence in a fire affinity chi method to suppress the poison gas. Currently, the heavenly flame you possess within your body is able to optimize the effects of the seal. Below is the sealing method. Qian Huazunja's voice had just sounded when a message surged into Xiao Yan's mind. He swiftly received it. The pretty, red-faced little fairy doctor shrank under the thin quilt. Her wonderful eyes, staring at Xiao Yan, were so red it seemed that water was about to seep out from them. Xiao Yan was somewhat embarrassed when he was stared at in this manner. He immediately thickened the skin of his face as he said, "It is indeed necessary for the seal." The bright redness on little fairy doctor's face was reduced greatly when she saw Xiao Yan's embarrassed manner. The back of her teeth bit her red lower lip. After which, she straightened her body in a mermaid-like manner. Her delicate hands trembled slightly as she removed her clothes. Her delicate hands moved and her clothes quietly fell. Immediately, a lovely suet-like naked body appeared in front of Xiao Yan, causing a certain person's breathing to involuntarily become a little heavier. If he were able to maintain a calm mind during such a situation, it was likely that he was not a man. Xiao Yan violently clenched his teeth. He gave himself 2 tight slaps in his heart. After which, he forcefully turned his gaze away and inhaled a deep breath. He attempted to maintain an unchanged tone as he said, "Lie down." After watching Xiao Yan, the embarrassment and anxiety within the little fairy doctor's heart became fainter without her realizing it. She slowly lay down as she was told and gently shut her pretty eyes. The corner of Xiao Yan's eye saw the little fairy doctor lay down. He once again inhaled a couple of deep breaths and got himself to completely calm down. After which, he slowly extended a finger. A wisp of a jade-green flame was vaguely visible on its tip. "It might be a little painful, but it will work if you endure it," Xiao Yan softly said. After which, his finger paused for a moment before falling suddenly. Eventually, it landed at a point below the little fairy doctor's neck, but above her breasts. When the finger pressed on this spot, the little fairy doctor's smooth jade-like skin emitted waves of white smoke. Some greyish air was faintly present within the smoke. A low muffled moan was emitted from the little fairy doctor's mouth as the white smoke rose. The little fairy doctor's eyebrows were vertical. At a glance, she really caused others to feel a tender affection for her. A faint green point appeared where Xiao Yang's finger had landed. Xiao Yang endured the comfort brought about by the gentle sensation as his finger slowly rolled down according to the route of the all-sky fire seal. At this moment, Xiao Yang's eyes were observing his nose and his nose was observing his heart. His mind was completely focused while his hand followed the seal drawing in his mind and moved slowly, sketching something. With the tracing of Xiao Yang's finger, a fire scar drawing that emitted threads of profoundness gradually appeared on the little fairy doctor's body. Perhaps it was because the sealing method was about to take shape, but the poison gas that had spread from little fairy doctor's body became swifter and more fierce. However, it was fortunate that Xiao Yan had the protection of a heavenly flame. The poison fog was completely vaporized by the frighteningly high temperature of the heavenly flame when it pounced over. The solemn look in Xiao Yang's eyes became denser. He appeared to have sensed the change of the poison gas within the little fairy doctor's body, and the speed at which his finger moved also increased. Numerous green-colored fire scars covered little fairy doctor's entire body in a gradual manner. With the quicker movement of Xiao Yan's hand, the strange feeling within the little fairy doctor's body became more concentrated. The faint searing pain feeling seemed to have transformed into an unusual pleasure at this moment. In the end, the little fairy doctor was unable to endure it any longer. A numb, lazy moan was secretly emitted from her small mouth. Xiao Yan's body quivered violently under the moan. His teeth bit the tip of his tongue with all his might, using the pain to suppress the nefarious flame that had suddenly rose within his body. He smiled bitterly and said, "Please, if you do not wish for your consciousness to be corroded by the poison gas, please, endure a little more. Don't distract me." The little fairy doctor's pretty face once again turned fiery hot when she heard Xiao Yan's words. She appeared just like a bright red apple. No matter how cold and indifferent she usually was, her current expression was no different than an ordinary girl. Xiao Yan also sighed in relief when he heard the little fairy doctor become quiet. He hurriedly focused his attention and continued to sketch the seal. All sky fire seal, the sky forms the shape, the fire forms the spirit. Seal. A cry was suddenly emitted from Xiao Yan's mouth. Immediately the light around the spot where Xiao Yan's hand was located became extremely bright. Almost like it was aware that the seal was about to be completed, the woeful poison body went crazy. An extremely thick poisonous vapor rushed out of the pores all over the little fairy doctor's body. The murky poison gas managed to break through Xiao Yan's defense even though he was using the glazed lotus heart flame to protect his body. The poison gas immediately entered his body through all of his pores. Magic Xiao Yan's expression became much dimmer when the poison gas entered his body. However, he still clenched his teeth and abruptly withdrew his hand. The intense light weakened and the many fire scars on the surface of the little fairy doctor's body gradually disappeared, appearing as though they had merged with her body. The poison gas within the little fairy doctor's body ceased seeping out the moment the fire scars disappeared. The skin on her body gradually returned to its normal color. The woeful poison body that was about to erupt was once again sealed. The little fairy doctor suddenly opened her eyes the instant the woeful poison body was sealed. She opened her small mouth and a suction force surged out. The poison fog that permeated the room immediately began to fluctuate. After which, it transformed into an enormous air dragon that was swallowed by the little fairy doctor. A strange expression immediately surfaced on the little fairy doctor's face after the final thread of poison was absorbed into her body. A glint flickered deep within her eyes. Without realizing it, the little fairy doctor's aura had swiftly become stronger, appearing as though she had taken a tonic. Within a couple of minutes, she broke through the 4-star level and advanced to the 5-star level. If an ordinary elite dozone were to see this speed, it was likely that the person would be completely stunned. The eruption of the woeful poison body this time around had not only failed to control the little fairy doctor, but had instead allowed her strength to significantly advance. It was really true, trouble and blessings appeared together. The ending was beyond anyone's expectations. The little fairy doctor gently sighed in relief as she sensed her internal body gradually becoming calm. Her delicate hand moved and her clothes rushed over. She swiftly covered her perfect body. Only after doing all this did she turn her head and discover Xiao Yan had collapsed on the bed. Her pretty face became anxious as she hurriedly lifted him up, only to see Xiao Yan's face being covered by a greyish gas as the poison invaded his body. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.